This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. My guest today is Tushar Aggarwal. Tushar is the CEO of Persistence, an interoperable protocol built to facilitate the creation of next-generation financial products. And Tushar is a member of the Forbes 30 Under 30 Asia Club. So, yeah, welcome to the show, Tushar.
Thank you for having me, Andy.
All right. Well, hey, just before we start to learn a little bit about what Persistence is, probably be good to learn a little bit about yourself. So if to begin with, could you please introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your background and where you're from?
Yep. So I originally come from India, spent 10 years in Singapore, which is when I got into crypto as well. So got into crypto in the 2016, 17, 18 cycle, mostly as an investor in the beginning. There were a lot of big projects that were coming out of Singapore at that time: Kyber Network, Republic Protocol, which is now called REN, Zilliqa, Icon, and so was involved in these projects mostly as an investor. Did well enough to quit my management consulting day job by the end of 2017 and decided to get into crypto full time. I started a podcast called Decrypt Asia, where I would interview different kinds of stakeholders. And that led to writing opportunities on Tech in Asia, where I would write about crypto, which led to me being the first employee at Lunex Ventures, which is the crypto arm of a traditional venture capital fund called Golden Gate Ventures, based out of Singapore. So at Lunex, I did everything from incorporating the fund to working with multiple service providers, tax advisors, auditors, fund administrators, cybersecurity consultants, Monetary Authority of Singapore as the local regulator to set up this fund. They raised capital back in 2018 from institutional LPs, including a publicly listed Japanese company, VC arm of a sovereign wealth fund, and multiple family offices, and then deployed that capital across a bunch of equity deals, kind of the picks and shovels of crypto, but also some ICOs, and then a bunch of tokens in the secondary markets. The overall mandate of the fund being a very broad exposure to the investors, very broad exposure to the crypto asset class, to the investors in the fund. I wanted Lunex to kind of bet on India at some level, in addition to the other deals that they were doing. But from a timing perspective, it was a little bit early. So I backed a few, Indian entrepreneurs in my own personal capacity, but kept coming down to India for multiple events and hackathons. My thesis was that India has the third largest number of unicorns after the US and China today in the non-crypto space. But 80% of these unicorns were born after the year 2010. So my thesis was that something similar was going to happen in the crypto space as well, where folks in India, there's talent, there's ambition, there's hunger, but they just typically operate with a bit of a lag. So spent some time in India, built out a team, which then over time evolved into Persistence. Early 2020 came out of Stealth. We're building a bunch of things. Persistence, for some of your listeners who may be following the Terra ecosystem, so Terra is a Tendermint-based protocol, and then they have multiple applications on top. So Chai is their third-party application. Anchor protocol, Mirror protocol are in-house applications. So we're kind of following a similar strategy where Persistence is a Tendermint-based protocol, and then we have Comdex as a third-party application, and then pSTAKE as a in-house liquid staking application that we're pushing on. So that's the high-level context of where we're at and how Persistence came into being. Happy to dig into the various aspects during the course of the interview.
Yeah, well, look, just before we do start to dig into persistence, it's interesting, you talk about I guess the rise of India, right? Just because, the kind of the population demographics of India are obviously very compelling with, so many people coming online and that entrepreneurial spirit. And, this is something that Balaji talks about a lot, right? Sort of the push and pull of different nation states and the rise of China and India. I guess the kind of China's relationship with blockchain and cryptocurrency and Bitcoin is talked about a lot because, China bans Bitcoin 3 or 4 times a year, it seems like. And, we've seen that play out again recently. We hear less about what's happening in India, though. So I'd love just to get, kind of your perspective on what you see happening in India in terms of not necessarily startup culture, but startup blockchain culture.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think there's different aspects. So there's obviously how the government views it, and I dare say that the Indian government is probably not as hostile as the Chinese government. But again, it really depends. Both India and China have capital controls. And so they have the same problem in terms of the risk of flight of capital. Although the other problem that China has in terms of trying to curb speculative activity, because I presume that's just how I think that's just Chinese culture at some level in terms of having huge appetite for risk and having that speculative mindset. I don't think that problem is there in India because I think it's just at a different it's just at a different stage of growth in terms of just being a nation and economically as well. And people who can speculate, I guess the government, being a democratic, it has no issues, I guess, speculating. But I think the biggest fear in the government's mind is just capital flight, where people don't believe enough in the Indian rupee. And then just, crypto becomes the easiest way to, move their assets into US dollars. So I think that's the biggest fear. But I think in terms of the entrepreneurial side of things, I think that it ebbs and kind of flows. But I think, overall you have some, good projects that have made a mark internationally. So Matic obviously is the community's darling. You have Instadap, which is consistently, at least until recently, was in the top 5 applications, top 7 applications, top 7 DeFi applications globally in terms of TVL. Persistence itself, we're shooting to be, a global project and shooting to be one of the best in the world. And then obviously you have, few unicorns in terms of centralized exchanges and a lot of pickup in global venture capital activity in terms of crypto startups and crypto projects in India. So overall, it looks pretty exciting, but still very, very precocious and early in terms of development and the ecosystem itself. So China and US have very self-sustaining ecosystems with their market makers, with their own exchanges, with, various service providers, the law firms and things like that. I think India still doesn't have all of that infrastructure and ecosystem yet to support those startups. So founders have to sort of go the extra mile to make things happen. But I think, things are getting there.
Yeah, and what about, I guess it's a little bit of a cliche to say, but, there's a perception, or I think it's true, that, in Indian culture, there's always been a really strong affinity with gold, right? So right. How is the kind of, the I guess Bitcoin as digital gold, has that caught on with younger generations or even older generations who would have an even stronger affinity and long rich history with gold? Where does that kind of digital gold narrative fit within the wider mainstream Indian culture at the moment?
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the spot in terms of that affinity towards gold, and why has, and it's not just for India, but for big parts of Middle East as well.
Of course.
And the reason that's been there, so even growing up, for me, my parents would always put every extra penny that they had into gold or real estate. Those were the OG stores of value.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of the younger generation, I don't think it's so much the digital gold narrative than India just being extremely digitally native. So I've spent a decade in Singapore, and Singapore being a quote unquote first world country, but if you look at the payments mechanism and the ability to order things via applications, and how many entrepreneurs there are trying to solve every little problem in India, I just haven't seen that kind of digital nativity in a lot of other Western developed nations, just because there isn't that enticing of a need to solve those problems, or the economics of solving those problems don't make sense. But in India, whether that is setting up your home to order furniture, to ordering groceries every day, to for some people who read newspapers still, the newspaper vendor, or your garbage collector, taking payments via payment applications. I mean, the digital nativity is crazy. And the thing is, the cost of living is so low. And now, there are so many unicorns, and, India is flush with so much venture capital money that, most folks want to just build something instead of, going to, one of the larger corporates or larger consulting or banking firms who are, truly not being able to, keep up with the salaries that startups can pay, because you could be working in Indian startups and be drawing, Silicon Valley salaries now, if you're good. So, I think from that perspective, I wouldn't say it's more of, a Bitcoin sort of picking up, but I think just crypto across the board, whether that is the usage of DeFi applications, NFTs. I think it was, if I'm not wrong, the Block, or one of the leading media houses and research houses that did this study on the most active number of users in crypto, and Vietnam was at number 1, and I think India was in the top 5 in terms of the number of users. So, I think those are super promising results. I think it's a combination of having a very young population. So India, unlike big parts of the Western world, has a normal pyramid in terms of the age distribution, very digitally native population. And in general, there's just a whole lot of optimism in the country in terms of, the future being significantly brighter than the present.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that, and I hope that turns out to be the case. And so, with what you guys are building at Persistence, then, are you aiming it at the local Indian market, or you just view it as an agnostic global crypto protocol? Do you make that distinction?
Very global. So our investors are global, our validators are global, our users are global, our delegators are global. We publicize in global communities. So we're building for the world.
Yeah. All right. And so, well, let's dig back into Persistence then. So I know you gave us a bit of a high level summary at the start of the show, but yeah, just go again. What's the kind of the 2-sentence elevator pitch for Persistence?
Yeah, essentially what we're doing is going after multiple asset classes, and Persistence is a protocol that enables, essentially access and availability of these different asset classes. So what are these asset classes? Some of them are crypto native, some of them are not so crypto native. So the crypto native ones, the biggest one that we're pushing right now is liquid staking. So the pSTAKE application. And the second one is more around NFTs, which is, kind of more being in stealth. And then there's Comdex, which is pushing out synthetic commodities. And so essentially what we're doing is trying to, provide a very sort of, providing the world with access to these quote unquote asset classes. So liquid staking obviously doesn't solve a problem for the world, but solves a problem within crypto. But we think it's a big enough problem within crypto, given that the total market cap of proof of stake coins is north of $600 billion. And basically outside of Bitcoin, which has emerged as the category winner in proof of work, every other protocol will or is operating on a proof of stake consensus mechanism. And holders of those coins, whether that's ETH once the merge happens and the transition to ETH2 happens, or whether that's Polkadot, Cosmos, Definity, Solana, they all follow some variation of the delegated proof of stake mechanism. And in that context, end users or holders of coins are delegating their tokens to validators, which allows them to take part in consensus and generate staking rewards. But their liquidity gets locked up, which is what we're trying to unlock with pSTAKE, starting with atoms and other Tendermint-based assets like Persistence itself, Terra, Luna, Injective Protocol, Akash Network, Kava, Iris Network. So those are some of the networks that we'll be going after to begin with. Obviously, the largest addressable market in terms of liquid staking itself is Ethereum, probably Solana after that.
Yeah.
But we've been part of the Cosmos ecosystem for a while and are big believers. And then in terms of Comdex, I think it's an interesting time to be in the financial markets where, we've had this crazy run over the last 12, 13 years post the global financial crisis, and multiple governments and central banks around the world have continued to print money. And you talked about gold and store of wealth, store of value earlier. And historically in high inflationary markets, along with gold, commodities have played that role as well of providing that hedge, or commodities actually being a great inflation trade, so to speak. So from that perspective, I think with the right sort of macro forces supporting Comdex, I think Comdex itself could do quite well. So essentially what we want to do is create these sort of new age asset classes, or at least give global access to these asset classes that historically have not had that global exposure.
Fantastic. And what kind of user growth are you seeing? So, while it's true that we've had this incredible run in financial markets over the last 13 years, if we condense that down to, say, the last 18 months or so of the current crypto bull market, we've seen sort of a couple of different waves of adoption across DeFi, two intense NFT mini bull markets this year. Bitcoin just kind of holding steady. What kind of user growth are you guys seeing?
So I think, across the board, so on the persistent side, it's more about the number of transactions on the chain, number of folks holding our tokens itself, or the number of, to put it another way, the number of wallets that have been created. I think those are the key metrics that we look at, and there's been sort of decent growth. I think we have 15,000 plus wallets that have been created, and in terms of number of transactions as well, I think we've had a decent amount of growth. With respect to pSTAKE itself, what we did was we did a capped launch because we were getting security audits done in parallel for the product, but we still wanted the product to be out there in the market. The strategy that we took was that we were doing a capped launch where you could only supply a certain number of atoms per week, up to a maximum of 125,000 atoms. And that cap was lifted recently. And so now we're chasing aggressive growth, and we'll be essentially incentivizing end users and holders of atoms and other Tendermint-based coins to be supplying liquidity to pSTAKE. So from that perspective, so still early days for us, but we have a TVL of about $5 million, and we'll, our goal is by the end of the year to try and get that up to 9 figures, so try and hit $100 million in TVL. Yeah, I mean, I think those are the sort of key metrics that we're looking at. Outside of that, obviously, crypto is hugely community driven. So we've had great engagement across the board in terms of our socials, and I think 70,000 plus members across Twitter, Telegram, and yeah, I mean, and what we also try to do is try to have as wide of a reach as possible in terms of geographies as well. So tapping into non-English speaking geographies, so Korean, Mandarin, Thai, Vietnamese, a few other languages. So high level, that's kind of where we're at. A lot of our validators for persistence itself are spread around the world, so we try to leverage on that as well. Overall, I would say still extremely early days for us, but we'll continue to build interesting products and try to see how to drive traction to those products. At some level, we've kind of figured out now how to. Again, I think over the last 2-3 years, it's been a crazy learning experience for me as well. I'm a first-time founder in terms of how to actually go about, and we started fundraising in the depths of the bear market. So it took us a year to just raise capital. Unlike, the run that we've had since June last year, since DeFi summer 1.0. So, in that context, it's been an interesting learning experience to just be like, okay, how do we, go about capital formation in the absence of capital formation? How do we make sure that we don't have to fire people or let go of the team because there's no money? To then trying to figure out how to create a brand, where we did the stake drop campaign, to trying to figure out the best way to take the token to market and ensuring that performs well, to continue to build the brand, to now building products and putting those products out at the retail level as well, and seeing how to capture their imagination in an industry where there is so many competing applications and protocols vying for folks' attentions. Being able to hire the right people, build the team, ensure cohesion within the team, while continuing to build on the brand and ensuring that your treasury is getting stronger every day. So I think those are things that we've now managed to sort of come to a point where the foundations are laid down, foundations are strong. Now it's just about how much growth can we achieve, how quickly can we grow. Can we grow 10x 20x from here in the next 3 months, and then post that how much do we want to push in terms of chasing that next 10x and the 10x after that.
Yeah, you make some interesting points there, Tushar, and yeah, I mean, that's one of the, I guess, unusual characteristics of a brand new asset class like crypto. You talk about starting off trying to raise capital in the kind of the bottom of the bear market, and that would have been a tough experience, I'm sure. But then the reverse is also true. What happens when if the bull market hits and then you've got an excess of resources, and then I suppose you've also got to be able to pivot as these new narratives and new mini ecosystems spin up. So I guess I'm talking about NFTs, right? And you sort of hinted at what you guys are doing with NFTs, but you didn't quite reveal what you're doing. So maybe, just love to know what you're doing with NFTs, and is that something that you have to kind of think about just on a sort of month to month basis? You have to kind of see where the market is shifting and make a decision as to whether you want to go there as well.
Actually, no. I mean, from our perspective, from a high level perspective, I've been an investor before, and investors have the luxury of changing their minds on a day-to-day or week-by-week, month-by-month basis. As an entrepreneur, you're mobilizing. As an investor, typically, you get rewarded for independent thinking. Whereas, typically when you're building, well, as an entrepreneur, you get rewarded for independent thinking as well. But what you're doing is you're carrying like a sort of a mini ship along, because, so we have 25 full-time folks within the organization. And so on a day-by-day or week-by-week basis, just because the market wants something, you can't shift your focus from one thing to another, because, ultimately your team will not have any clear direction in terms of what you're trying to achieve. And over a period of time, they will, essentially leave you due to the lack of clarity in terms of what you're trying to do. And so in that context, even with respect to NFTs, what we're doing is we've been part of the Cosmos ecosystem, and Cosmos ascribes to the philosophy of interoperability. So as opposed to having general purpose chains like Solana or Ethereum, in the Cosmos ecosystem, you have application specific chains. And so you have these mini chains that all interact with each other and interoperate with each other. So with respect to NFTs, our vision has been that of interoperable NFTs, where you have multi-chain NFTs jumping from one chain to another. And people talk about interoperability in the context of fungible tokens, but not in the context of non-fungible tokens. So that's something we've been working on for quite a while. So the CTO of Persistence, Dipanshu, he's been a huge fan advocate of NFTs in general. He had also demonstrated the first under certain permissioned environments. He had demonstrated an NFT, essentially being transferred from one chain to another. And this is, in early 2020, when NFTs were not even that hard. But in general, we were working more at the protocol level and not so much at the end user level, which is why there's no like end user application that can be used created by Persistence. But now we're sort of vertically integrating up with the application layer to, capture the end user also. And we've realized that there is value capture at that layer. And so it's just a prioritization thing at the moment, where we're prioritizing pSTAKE and liquid staking, and then we'll be going after NFTs. From my perspective, what I always hope for is a bear market at some level, because that really shakes out the serious people from the non-serious people, and kind of would allow us more time and bandwidth to focus on some of the stuff that we've been wanting to implement. So, high level, we're not sort of just going with the flow and being like, okay, this is what the market wants. As an entrepreneur, you always have to kind of see, 6 months or 12 months or 18 months before something is going to be hard, and then create that at the right time so that you can ride out that wave once people are actually starting to use it. And so from that perspective, I still think like we're in the super early days of staking itself, and liquid staking is going to come after that. And given the size of the market, that's why we're betting on liquid staking. And the issuance of staked representative coins, or STK atoms, for some of the folks that may know about pSTAKE or may know about liquid staking in general. That's the first piece of the Lego. This, next piece is obviously integrating these, liquid staked representative coins on various DeFi protocols. And then finally, having very passive asset management strategies like indexes and vaults and things like that. So again, we usually try to operate with a longer term vision of what we're trying to do. It makes it much easier to sell to investors, makes it much easier to sell to the community members, makes it much easier to sell internally to employees, as opposed to this haphazard approach of being like, okay, today this is hard, so let's do it.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, just to finish off this part of the podcast then, Tushar, I'd be interested to I suppose get your thoughts on perhaps, where you think we are in terms of whether this is a market cycle. You talk about how it's sometimes better to build in a bear market, but also, I suppose the end pot of users who are prepared to engage with different DeFi protocols and stake their assets. It's always a smaller piece of the pie as opposed to, say, a casual holder of Bitcoin or a casual collector of one or two NFTs. Obviously those are incredible use cases, and they just bring more and more people into the digital asset ecosystem. But in terms of the kind of the hardcore DeFi user base, how do you see that being built out, I guess, over the next cycle or the next year or two, and what are the bits and pieces, the products and services that are needed to help facilitate that?
Yeah. So Andy, so this is something that I have a bit of a different take on, or at least I think a lot of industry insiders acknowledge this, but probably don't speak about it out loud. The narrative around DeFi has been about banking the unbanked, but it's basically doing anything but that. Or even if it's doing that, there's a very small percentage of DeFi that does that, which is fine. In general, if you look at traditional finance, and if you look at retail, the whole philosophy of what does finance do? Where from a retail perspective, it's earning, saving, spending, and investing. Those are the four things that retail does with their money. But 80% of finance on the traditional finance side is extremely complex, structured products that are used by hedge funds and large corporates in order to hedge their risks or to speculate. And at some level, that is being replicated in the DeFi world as well, where sure, you have ease of just lending some assets on Compound, or just being able to transfer assets easily because you can use USDT instead of going via the Swift ecosystem. But 80% of, or maybe even more than that, of DeFi applications are being built for extremely sophisticated investors who, on top of understanding all the traditional risks, also which include market risk and all other kinds of risks, also take on smart contract risk and have deep understandings at some level of the various things that could go wrong. So even from our perspective, for example, for pSTAKE, it's a very sort of B2B kind of business as opposed to or B2B to C kind of business as opposed to just being B2C, which a lot of DeFi applications look like or try to position themselves as. So that's kind of how I think going forward. I mean, I think there's obviously going to be retail participation. I think that's a general trend that we see across the board in terms of the hyper financialization of the world, and with with the likes of whatever happened with GameStop and the rise of the Robin Hooders, who are like sort of avid investors or speculators. But I think still a lot of interest is still driven by institutions, and so I would say that, yeah, I think from an absolute money perspective, absolute capital perspective, I think you'll have some avid retail folks who, by the way, act like institutions because they do as much, if not more, due diligence than the institutions. And yeah, so I think that's how kind of finance as a whole evolves, including DeFi.
Yeah, that makes sense. Very nice thoughts. I enjoyed that. Well, let's go to a very quick break, Tushar, and then let's come back and we'll have some fun. We'll finish off with the very famous Crypto Conversation hot take round.
In today's crypto market, the team at Brave New Coin are the sector's leading builders of custom crypto indices. BNC's powerful indexing engine draws on Brave New Coin's premium data to calculate high-frequency intraday and end-of-day indices for a wide range of index products. BNC's custom indices help you to gain exposure to the crypto assets class and track your performance against the market without having to become a stock picker. Not sure what you need? A Brave New Coin consultant can help you assess your requirements. Contact BNC today to find out more.
All right, we're back, and I'm with Tushar Aggarwal. Tushar is the CEO of Persistence, the interoperable protocol that is building out various next-generation financial products around DeFi, NFTs. Hey, Tushar, I'd like to finish each podcast with just a quick round of rapid-fire crypto conversation hot takes. Are you up for it?
Let's do it, Andy.
Let's do it, Tushar. All right, well, just quick, snappy answers, hot take style, just a bit of fun. I know the answer to the first one, but here we go. Where would you say that you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-coin opportunist spectrum?
I'm an interoperability maximalist.
Very nice. Wonderfully said. Thank you. All right. What would you say is your firmest conviction crypto opinion?
You mean with respect to assets?
Well, with respect to crypto, anything.
I'm biased, but I think liquid staking is very underrated.
I'm going to say that's a niche answer, but in the context of Persistence, probably not. So we'll take it. We're happy with that. Here's a curveball for you, Tushar. UBI as a potential fix for AI-induced automation, or like a kind of dystopian future world of intense inequality. UBI, good idea or terrible idea?
I think it's inevitable, regardless of whether it's good or bad. I think it's inevitable.
Tend to agree. All right. Well, Bill Gates famously said we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. So look, whatever you like here, a blockchain, DeFi, liquid staking, what does it look like in 10 years' time?
It's very difficult to say. I mean, I think there's too many external forces, and high level, I think from crypto, and although it's a bit of a longish answer, but as the cliche goes, a day in crypto is 3 days in the real world, 3 days is a week is a month is 3 months, 3 months is a year is 3 years, and 3 years is a decade. So I think from that perspective, I think in 2-3 years from now, I think we'll still see a lot of the same problems being addressed. I think a lot of the things that are being implemented right now, I think these ideas have been around for a while. It just took 2-3 years to build, which is a different way of how crypto works, where you're sort of building a very early stage technology company, but you're building it as a public company, which is a bit of a challenge, which is why these things happen, where it just seems like it's taking forever for companies to ship things, but that's the typical sort of life cycle that it takes to build tech products. So I think we'll see a lot of the same ideas that are floating around today kind of floating around in the next 2-3 years as well. I think just the overall user interface, user experience will be a little bit better.
Yeah, you would hope so. I guess the reverse of that is that, William Gibson famously said that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. Can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people just aren't aware of it?
I mean, I think DeFi is a great example of that, right? Where you have, like, on some of the top DeFi protocols, people just look at TVLs, but you look one level deeper and you look at the number of wallets that are contributing to that TVL, and it's probably less than 10,000, definitely less than 50,000 that contribute 80% of the $180 billion or so in TVL on these various DeFi applications. So I think that, and the ability to generate 3-digit APYs for extended periods on like millions of dollars of capital, which is the case in crypto. I think that in itself skews a lot of things to various early adopters, whether that's like I think 97-98% men, or whether that is folks who have the capital or who have generated the capital in crypto and are now able to allocate it, so or have the technical know-how how to do things. So I think definitely it's skewing, and it's skewing really quickly. And again, I think broadly speaking, outside of crypto as well, if we were to look at macro, I think things like biotech, a lot of value accruing to very few people. AI, a lot of value accruing to very few people. Robotics, crypto. I think, these are all deep. Basically, any deep tech company, you have basically you need 30, 40 people to create like a unicorn or a decacorn, which is insane.
Yeah, well, in the context of what you've just explained there, then, Tushar, zoom out and get a bit weird. What do you see as the long-term future for the human race? Do you see dystopia or utopia?
I think, I'd always bet on human resilience and human capabilities and abilities and proclivity to solve problems. And so, one could argue that we already live in utopia, or one could argue that we already live in a dystopian world. But I think, human beings have a tendency to just go out and solve problems. And so tomorrow, if, wealth inequality really starts causing huge problems, especially for the rich will have incentives to go out and solve that problem. And it's something, again, if we zoom out, and, I'm a student of history, at various times in history, we've had, whether it was Rome at the peak of its powers, where there was a lot of centralization of wealth and power. Over time, the sort of quote unquote masses, do take those powers back, and then that cycle continues. And so I think what we're witnessing is not unique. Obviously, the amount of leverage that you get because of technology is, we haven't seen that in history, but I think overall, fundamentally, these cycles just keep repeating, and the seats of power keep changing, and you have these cycles which obviously, is very difficult for you and I to visualize or see, because we just look in the context of our lifetimes. But I think if we kind of really zoom out, like you said, I think it's fairly normal.
Yeah. Hard to argue with that. Very nicely said again, Tushar. All right, well, let's close this out. Finally, what is your favorite science fiction book, film, show, or universe?
No specific, book or movie or piece. In general, a big fan of I think space in general and anything and everything to do with it. As a kid as well, I used to, back when newspapers had pictures of astronauts, because even, these days you don't see that many pictures of astronauts. But, as a kid also, I collected a whole bunch of, pictures and articles about that. I find every sort of space-focused book or movie, very calming, because I guess it just reminds you of, how insignificant you are in the grander scheme.
Yes, indeed. Very nice. Very nice. All right. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Tushar, I've enjoyed talking to you today. Nothing else to say really, except to hand the metaphorical microphone back to your good self. Please tell the people where they can go to find you on your various platforms, and where they should go to dig into what you guys are building at Persistence.
Yeah, so Persistence is active on Twitter, Telegram. I'm active, most responsive on Twitter, @ my first name, Tushar307. Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, best of luck with Persistence. Can't wait to see how everything plays out. All the best, and bye for now.
Thank you, Andy.
All right, there you go. That was Tushar Aggarwal. Tushar is the CEO at Persistence. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that one. That was, quite interesting. Tushar is a very smart guy, bit of a deep thinker. Yeah, so I enjoyed that. Hope you did too. Thanks very much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the Crypto Conversation in whatever podcast app you are using. If you want to get at me, just drop me an email, andy@bravenewcoin.com. But that's us for today. See you real soon. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coin. See ya.